I overheard my parents planning to move my sister into my apartment through the security camera I installed in the living room. My dad was explaining to my mom that once Julia is already settled in, Marina won't have the heart to kick out her own pregnant sister. I saw them measuring my furniture, planning where to put the crib, and even my sister choosing what the new baby's room would be. My home office, where I saw my patients online, my hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped my phone. There they were, inside my apartment that I'd bought with my money after 6 years of brutal residency shifts, treating it like community property. The rage that flooded through me was white hot, but what came out of my mouth was laughter. Cold, sharp laughter that made my colleague Dr. Stevens look up from his charts with concern. Through the camera feed, I watched my mother open my closet and start pulling out my clothes. "These can go to storage," she said casually, tossing my designer blazers onto the bed like garbage. My father nodded approvingly while measuring the wall for what looked like a changing table. Julia, 7 months pregnant and radiating entitlement, plopped herself on my leather couch and put her swollen feet up on my coffee table. "This place is perfect," she cooed. "So much better than that cramped apartment Marcus and I have been looking at. And it's not like Marina needs all this space just for herself." What they didn't know was that I wasn't just a clinical psychologist who happened to have security cameras. I was also the daughter who'd been meticulously documenting every conversation, every dismissive comment, every time they'd chosen Julia over me for the past 29 years. And I'd just realized that the spare key I'd given them for emergencies was about to become the rope they'd hang themselves with. I grew up in Miami, the older daughter of Ricardo and Camila Castellanos. My father owned a successful car dealership, and my mother ran a small catering business. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. Or at least, they made sure Julia was comfortable. From the moment my sister was born when I was 7, I became invisible. The cherished firstborn transformed overnight into the responsible one. The one who didn't need attention because she was so mature for her age. Julia got piano lessons while I was told music wasn't practical. She got a new car for her 16th birthday while I worked 2 jobs to buy my own beat-up Honda. When I got accepted to Stanford for my undergraduate degree, my parents suggested community college would be more financially sensible. When Julia barely scraped into a state school, they threw her a party and bought her a condo near campus. The pattern was so consistent it became my normal, until therapy in my early 20s helped me see how profoundly screwed up it all was. I'd worked my ass off to become a clinical psychologist, specializing in family trauma and narcissistic family systems. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd bought this apartment 2 years ago in a secure building in Coral Gables, my sanctuary from the toxicity I'd grown up with. I'd given my parents a key because, despite everything, some pathetic part of me still craved their approval. That key was about to cost them more than they could imagine. My phone buzzed. A text from Julia. "Hey sis, can we talk? Have a huge favor to ask." I smiled at the screen. They thought they were so clever getting into my apartment to present me with a fait accompli. What they didn't realize was that I'd installed those cameras after my mother had borrowed my grandmother's pearl necklace from my jewelry box during her last visit. The one thing I had from my father's mother, who'd always made me feel seen. I'd found it weeks later in Julia's Instagram photos, draped around her neck at some party. "Sure," I texted back. "Why don't you all come over for dinner on Saturday? I'll cook." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. They were probably conferring, wondering if I somehow knew. Finally, perfect. Can't wait. I had 4 days to prepare. 4 days to set the stage for the most satisfying family dinner of my life. Because what they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd been in touch with Marcus's parents for the past 3 months. They'd reached out to me after Julia had convinced their son to cut them off, concerned about some concerning behaviors they'd noticed. Turned out, Julia had been systematically isolating Marcus from his family while draining his bank accounts. The baby wasn't even his. But that revelation would come later. First, I needed to let them walk into the trap they'd built themselves. Saturday arrived with perfect Miami weather, sunny with just enough breeze to make the temperature pleasant. I'd spent the week preparing not just the meal, but documentation. Every piece of evidence meticulously organized in folders, both digital and physical. My apartment looked immaculate, almost like a showroom, which would make their intrusion all the more jarring when I revealed what I knew. They arrived at 6 sharp, my parents carrying wine and an expensive dessert from my mother's favorite bakery. Julia waddled in behind them, one hand on her belly, the other clutching Marcus's arm like a lifeline. He looked uncomfortable, his eyes darting around my apartment with something that looked like guilt. "Interesting." "Marina, darling, your place looks wonderful," my mother gushed, kissing my cheek while scanning the room with the predatory assessment of someone planning renovations. My father headed straight for the living room, his gaze lingering on the walls they'd measured just days ago. Thanks, Mom. I love this place. Worked hard to afford it. I emphasized the word afford just slightly, watching for reactions. Julia shifted her weight, suddenly fascinated by her phone. Dinner was my specialty: arroz con pollo, tostones, and my grandmother's secret recipe for flan. The same grandmother whose necklace currently sat in my jewelry box upstairs, retrieved from Julia's apartment during a visit she didn't know I'd made. I'd learned lockpicking from a patient who'd been a former locksmith, one of many useful skills acquired through my profession. So, Julia, I said, serving the rice with surgical precision, how's the apartment hunting going? Found anything in your price range yet? She exchanged glances with our parents. Actually, that's something we wanted to talk to you about. Marcus and I have been looking, but everything decent is so expensive, and with the baby coming, we thought, my father interrupted smoothly, that perhaps you could help your sister out. You have that extra bedroom just sitting empty. I took a slow sip of wine, savoring the moment. The home office, where I conduct patient sessions? You could do those somewhere else, my mother said dismissively. Family comes first, Marina. Your sister needs you. The audacity was breathtaking. I set down my wine glass with deliberate care. That's interesting, because I could have sworn I saw you all in here earlier this week, measuring my furniture, planning where to put a crib. Without asking me, without even telling me. The silence that fell over the table was delicious. Julia's face went pale, then flushed red. My father's jaw tightened. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again like a fish gasping for air. I have security cameras, I continued conversationally, cutting into my chicken. Very high-quality ones. I installed them after Mom borrowed Grandma's necklace without asking. Remember that, Julia? The pearls you wore to Sandra's party? The ones you told everyone Marcus bought you? Marcus's head snapped toward Julia. You said those were from your grandmother, that she gave them to you before she died. She did give them to someone before she died. I smiled. To me. In her will. Specifically to me, because she knew exactly what kind of family dynamics were at play. Julia just helped herself when Mom borrowed them from my apartment. This is ridiculous, my father blustered. We're your family. We were just trying to help by breaking into my home, by planning to move Julia in without my consent, by assuming I'd just accept it because I wouldn't have the heart to kick out my pregnant sister. Those were your exact words, Dad. Would you like me to play the audio? I pulled out my phone, already cued to the recording. My father's voice filled my dining room. Once Julia is already settled in, Marina won't have the heart to kick out her own pregnant sister. We just need to get her stuff moved in while Marina's at that conference next month. Marcus pushed back from the table, his face a mask of betrayal. You were planning to move in without telling me? We've been looking at apartments together, and you were planning to just… What? Leave me? No, baby, that's not… Julia reached for him, but he jerked away. Don't. Just don't. He looked at me with something like respect. Dr. Castellanos, I apologize for being part of this. I didn't know. I know you didn't, Marcus. In fact, I know a lot of things, like how Julia emptied your savings account last month, how she's been taking money from your parents while telling you they cut you off, how she convinced you to stop talking to them by lying about things they supposedly said about you. Julia stood abruptly, tears streaming down her face. You're ruining everything. You've always been jealous of me, always trying to make me look bad. Sit down. My voice was ice. We're not done yet. The command in my tone surprised even me, but years of managing crisis interventions with volatile patients had taught me how to project authority. Julia sank back into her chair, her tears momentarily frozen by shock. Marcus remained standing, his hands gripping the back of his chair until his knuckles went white. Here's what's going to happen, I continued, my voice steady and clinical. You're going to sit here and listen to everything I know. Then you're going to leave my apartment, return my spare key, and never enter my home uninvited again. And if you're very, very lucky, I might not press charges for trespassing and theft. My mother found her voice. Marina, this is your family. How can you be so cruel to your pregnant sister? I laughed, a genuine bitter sound that made her flinch. Cruel? Mom, I'm going to tell you what cruel is. Cruel is making your 7-year-old daughter feel invisible the moment her sister is born. Cruel is telling that daughter that Stanford was too expensive while buying her sister a condo. Cruel is stealing her dead grandmother's jewelry and giving it to the golden child. Cruel is breaking into her home and planning to take over her life without her consent. I stood and walked to my home office, returning with a thick folder. This is 29 years of documentation. Every dismissal, every comparison, every time you chose Julia over me. Therapy homework, my therapist called it. Document the patterns, she said. You'll need it to maintain boundaries. I dropped the folder on the table. Photographs spilled out. My parents at Julia's college graduation, beaming with pride. My own graduation from Stanford, which they'd missed because it conflicted with Julia's semester finals. Screenshots of text messages where my mother asked me to be understanding about Julia borrowing money she never repaid. Bank statements showing the 15R, 0. I'd loaned my sister for emergency dental work that had actually funded a vacation to Cancun with her friends. But the best part, I said, pulling out another envelope, is this. I slid it across to Marcus. Open it. His hands shook as he unsealed the envelope and pulled out the DNA test results. His face went from pale to gray as he read. This says, I'm not the father. No, you're not. I kept my voice gentle, professional. The actual father is Brett Kovach. He was Julia's high school boyfriend, the one who moved to Atlanta last year. They've been having an affair for 18 months. The baby is due exactly 38 weeks after his last visit to Miami. Julia's tears had stopped. In their place was something cold and calculating, the mask finally slipping. You can't prove that. Actually, I can. Brett's parents hired a private investigator after he started sending large sums of money to a Miami address. The investigator found your correspondence. All of it. The plans to pass the baby off as Marcus's. The discussions about how much child support you could get. The backup plan to move in with me if Marcus found out, because Marina's too weak to say no to family. I turned to my parents. Did you know about any of this? My father's face was stone, but something flickered in his eyes. Doubt. For the first time, he was looking at Julia with something other than blind adoration. Of course they didn't know, Julia spat, because they don't need to know everything about my life. Unlike you, Marina, I don't report every detail to mommy and daddy for approval. No, I agreed. You just manipulate them into giving you everything you want while destroying anyone who gets in your way, including your own sister. Including Marcus. Including his family. Marcus was staring at the DNA results like they might rearrange themselves into different words. I proposed to you. I was going to raise this child. I cut off my parents because you said they disrespected you. All of it was lies? She told your parents you were controlling her. I said quietly, that you were isolating her from her family. Classic Darvo. Deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. It's a manipulation tactic used by abusers. Your parents reached out to me 3 months ago, desperate to understand what was happening to their son. I'm a psychologist who specializes in family trauma. They found my professional profile and saw the family resemblance in my photos. I pulled out my phone and showed him the email chain. We've been working together to document everything. Every lie Julia told you about them, every manipulation, every instance of financial abuse. Your mother has been devastated, Marcus. She thinks she failed you as a parent. Oh, please, Julia snarled, her facade completely shattered now. Marcus's mother is a controlling bitch who couldn't stand that her precious baby boy chose me over her. I did him a favor cutting her out. The words hung in the air like poison. My mother gasped. Even my father looked shocked at the venom in Julia's voice. Marcus's expression hardened into something I'd never seen before. Pure, cold rage. Get out of my sight. We're done. The engagement is over. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the prenatal fraud. Prenatal fraud? Julia's laugh was shrill. That's not even a real thing. It is in Florida, I said calmly. Paternity fraud is grounds for criminal charges and civil lawsuits. Marcus can sue for damages, emotional distress, and recovery of any money spent on prenatal care and preparations for a child that isn't his. He can also press charges for theft regarding the money you took from his accounts without permission. I turned to my parents. And you too? Your accessories to breaking and entering. I have video footage of you using my spare key to enter my apartment without permission or notification. In Florida, that's criminal trespass even with a key, since you didn't have consent to enter. Add in the conspiracy to commit housing fraud by moving someone into my home without my knowledge or agreement, and we're looking at serious charges. My mother's face crumpled. Marina, please, we're your parents. We made a mistake, but you made 29 years of mistakes, Mom. This was just the one I finally caught on camera. The apartment fell into suffocating silence. My father sat rigid, his car dealer's smile completely gone, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. My mother clutched her napkin, mascara starting to run down her cheeks. Julia's face cycled through emotions. Rage, panic, calculation. Like she was mentally running through her options and finding them all blocked. Marcus broke the silence first. I need to leave. Dr. Castellanos, thank you for telling me the truth. My lawyer will be in touch with you, Julia. He grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair and walked toward the door, then paused. My parents were right about you. I should have listened. The door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow felt louder than if he'd slammed it. Julia rounded on me, her face contorted with fury. You smug bitch. You think you're so smart, so superior with your fancy degree and your perfect little apartment. You've ruined my life. No, I said, my voice calm and clinical. You ruined your own life. I just held up a mirror. We're family, she screamed. You're supposed to support me no matter what. Family doesn't break into each other's homes. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't lie and manipulate and destroy people's lives for personal gain. What you did to Marcus, to his parents, to me, that's not family. That's abuse. My father finally spoke, his voice heavy. Marina, I think you're being harsh. Julia made some mistakes, yes, but she's still your sister. She's pregnant and scared and... Scared? I cut him off. She's not scared, Dad. She's angry that she got caught. There's a difference. I pulled out another folder. Do you want to know what else I found when I started investigating? Julia has 3 credit cards in your name, Mom. She opened them 2 years ago using your information. The total debt is $4,700. She's been making minimum payments from Marcus's account to keep you from finding out. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. No, that's not possible. I would have gotten statements. She changed the mailing address to a P.O. box. I have the documentation right here. You can verify it with the credit card companies on Monday. I watched my mother's face crumble as the truth sank in. My father grabbed the folder and started flipping through the pages, his expression darkening with each document he read. There's more. I continued relentlessly. The emergency dental work I loaned her money for never happened. The business opportunity Dad invested $25,000 in last year, there was no business. She used that money to pay off Brett when he threatened to tell Marcus about the affair. The stolen laptop you replaced for her, Mom? She sold it on eBay to buy designer handbags. Julia's face had gone from red to white. You went through my private records? That's illegal. No, it's not. Not when someone files for fraud protection and discovers their identity has been stolen. Not when a victim of financial abuse requests documentation for legal proceedings. Not when a licensed psychologist is subpoenaed to provide expert testimony in a case involving financial elder abuse. The word elder made my parents flinch. They weren't even 60 yet, but legally the credit card fraud could be classified as exploitation of vulnerable adults if I framed it right. You wouldn't, my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. Try me. I met his eyes steadily. You came into my home, planned to take it over, and assumed I'd be too weak, too desperate for your approval to fight back. You spent my entire life teaching me that I didn't matter, that Julia's needs always came first, that I should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention you threw my way. Well, congratulations. You taught me exactly how much I could rely on family. The lesson took, Dad. It really did. My mother was crying openly now. How can you be so cold? We raised you, sacrificed for you. You raised me to be invisible. You sacrificed nothing for me that you didn't give twice over to Julia. And you know what the worst part is? I would have helped her. If she'd come to me honestly, if she'd asked instead of schemed, I probably would have let her stay here temporarily while she figured things out. I'm not cruel, Mom. I'm just done being a doormat. I walked to the door and opened it. Get out. All of you. You have 5 minutes to leave before I call the police and have you removed for trespassing. Julia grabbed her purse, her movements sharp and angry. This isn't over, Marina. You can't just... It is over. And if you contact me again, if you come near my home, if you so much as mention my name on social media, I will file charges for everything I have documented. The fraud, the theft, the trespassing, all of it. You'll be lucky if you're not in jail when that baby is born. She stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. My parents moved more slowly, my mother still crying. My father's face a mask of controlled fury that I recognized from my childhood, the expression that used to make me shrink and apologize for existing. Not anymore. You're going to regret this, he said quietly as he passed me. Family is all you have in this world, Marina. When you're alone and miserable, don't come crawling back to us. I won't, I promised. I have plenty of family, Dad. I have friends who actually care about me. I have colleagues who respect me. I have patients who trust me. What I don't have anymore is people who treat me like a backup plan and an ATM machine. After they left, I locked the door, engaged the deadbolt, and leaned against it. My hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. I'd just blown up my entire family in one dinner. But as I looked around my apartment, my beautiful, hard-earned sanctuary, I felt something I hadn't felt in years when thinking about my family. Relief. Monday morning arrived with a series of texts from my mother, each more desperate than the last. I blocked her number after the 5th message, then blocked my father and Julia too. The freedom was intoxicating. I'd spent 29 years trying to earn their love, and it took one dinner to realize I'd never had it to begin with. Marcus called that afternoon. Dr. Castellanos, I wanted to thank you again. I spoke with my parents. They're willing to provide statements about everything Julia told me about them. My lawyer says we have a strong case for fraud and theft. I'm glad you're reconnecting with them, I said. They love you, Marcus. They were just trying to protect you from someone they could see was dangerous. I should have listened sooner. His voice was thick with regret. I have one question, though. Why did you help me? You barely know me. Because I know what it's like to be manipulated by family. And because someone should have protected you. I wish someone had protected me. The week that followed was chaos. Julia tried to get ahead of the story by posting on social media about her cruel, jealous sister, who'd turned her out while she was pregnant. It backfired spectacularly when Marcus's mother, a woman with no patience for nonsense, posted the DNA results publicly, along with screenshots of Julia's messages to Brett discussing the paternity fraud. The post went viral in our local community. My parents' friends began distancing themselves. My mother's catering business took a hit as clients quietly canceled orders. My father's dealership saw a downturn when people started connecting the dots. If he'd enabled this behavior in his daughter, how honest was he in his business dealings? I felt no satisfaction in their suffering, but I felt no guilt either. They'd made their choices. Now they were living with the consequences. Brett Kovacs, interestingly, wanted nothing to do with the situation. His lawyer sent a cease and desist letter to Julia, demanding she stop claiming he was the father and threatening legal action if she pursued child support. Turned out Brett was engaged to someone in Atlanta and had no intention of acknowledging a child from an affair. Julia ended up moving back in with my parents, her pregnancy now a scarlet letter in our community. Every attempt she made to rehabilitate her image was met with the cold, hard evidence I'd compiled. The credit card fraud investigation was moving forward, and my mother had to file a police report to begin the process of clearing her name and credit. My father called from a number I didn't recognize. I answered by mistake, thinking it was a patient. Marina, we need to talk. Your mother is devastated. She's had to close her business. People are treating us like criminals. You are criminals, Dad. You broke into my home. Mom's identity was stolen by her own daughter with your knowledge and tacit approval. You taught Julia that the rules don't apply to her, that she could take whatever she wanted from whoever she wanted. This is just the bill coming due. She's your sister. She needs family support right now. Then support her yourself. You've spent 3 decades choosing her over me. Don't stop now. And what about us? What about your mother and me? The question hung in the air. I looked around my apartment, peaceful and secure. Finally, truly mine. What about you? You were willing to let Julia take over my home. You were in on the plan. You measured my furniture for her crib. You never once asked me if I'd be okay with it, because you never cared if I was okay with anything. You just expected me to fall in line like I always did. We're your parents. You were sperm and egg donors who kept me fed and housed. That's not the same as being parents. Real parents don't pick favorites. Real parents don't enable one child to destroy the other. Real parents don't break into their daughter's home and plot to take it over. I hung up. He didn't call back. 3 weeks after the dinner, Marcus's lawsuit was filed. Julia was being sued for $150, star dollars, and damages. The cost of the engagement ring, money she'd taken from his accounts, emotional distress, and the cost of prenatal care for a child that wasn't his. His lawyer was confident they'd win. The credit card fraud investigation had escalated. Prosecutors were considering charges not just against Julia, but potentially against my parents for failing to report the fraud once they became aware of it. My mother had to hire a criminal defense attorney. As for me, I was thriving. My practice was busier than ever. Apparently, my story had resonated with other people dealing with toxic families, and referrals were pouring in. I'd started a support group for family scapegoats, people who'd been designated as the problem child while their siblings got away with everything. Every session reminded me that I wasn't alone, that my experience was valid, and that cutting ties with toxic family members wasn't selfish, it was survival. Julia gave birth in December, 3 months after our confrontation. She named the baby Sophia. Brett sent a DNA test kit to her hospital room with a note saying he'd acknowledge paternity only if the test proved it. But he wanted nothing to do with her personally. The test came back positive. Brett's lawyer negotiated a child support agreement that required Julia to sign away any rights to contact him or his new wife. My parents put their house on the market in January. The legal fees and loss of business income had drained their savings. My mother called me one last time, her voice broken. "Marina, please. We're losing everything. Can't you help us? Like you helped me?" I asked. "By breaking into my home? By choosing Julia over me for 29 years? By teaching me that I only mattered when I was useful? We made mistakes, but we're still your parents. No, your biological relatives who failed at parenting. There's a difference." I hung up and blocked that number too. 2 years after that dinner, I stood in my apartment, the same beautiful apartment they'd tried to take from me, and looked at the life I'd built. My practice was fully booked, specializing in helping people set boundaries with toxic family members. I'd published a paper on narcissistic family systems that was getting attention in professional circles. I was dating a kind, stable man who came from a healthy family and couldn't comprehend the dynamics I'd grown up with. I'd kept tabs on my former family through mutual acquaintances, not because I cared, but because I wanted to ensure they stayed away from me. Julia was living with my parents in a small rental, working part-time at a grocery store while they watched Sophia. Brett's child support covered basics, but the lifestyle she'd expected, the one she'd tried to build by trapping Marcus, was gone. Marcus had married someone else, a woman from a healthy family who his parents adored. My parents had aged dramatically. The stress of everything had taken its toll. My father's dealership had been sold to pay legal fees and settle debts. My mother's catering business never recovered. They'd lost their home, their social standing, their comfortable retirement, and they'd lost the daughter who might have helped them if they'd ever treated her like she mattered. I felt no guilt about their situation. They'd built their lives on a foundation of favoritism and enabling toxic behavior. When that foundation crumbled, they fell with it. That was justice, not cruelty. Sometimes I thought about reaching out, about offering some kind of olive branch. Then I'd remember my father measuring my walls for Julia's crib, my mother sorting through my clothes like they were donations, Julia planning which room would be the nursery, my office, where I helped people heal from families just like ours. They taught me an important lesson, though they'd never intended to. Some people will take everything you have and still believe they're entitled to more. The only way to protect yourself is to cut them off completely, to build a life they can't access, to thrive in spaces they can't invade. My apartment was more than just a home now. It was a symbol of everything I'd built without them, everything I'd become despite them, every patient I helped, every boundary I modeled, every person I taught to value themselves. It was all proof that their assessment of me had been wrong. I wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. I wasn't the backup plan. I wasn't the weak one who couldn't say no. I was the woman who'd said no when it mattered most, who'd protected her sanctuary, who'd refused to let toxic people define her worth. And I was happy. Genuinely, peacefully happy in a way I'd never been when I was trying to earn their love. The security cameras were still there, not because I expected them to return, but because I'd learned to protect what was mine. The spare key had been destroyed. The locks had been changed. My boundaries were titanium now, forged in the fire of that final confrontation. Sometimes people asked if I ever regretted cutting them off so completely. My answer was always the same. You can't regret protecting yourself from people who saw you as a resource instead of a person. They'd chosen Julia over me for 29 years. I'd finally chosen myself. And unlike their choices, mine had led to peace, success, and genuine happiness. That was the best revenge of all. Update: 2 years later. The notification came through on a Tuesday afternoon while I was between patient sessions. An email from a name I hadn't seen in years. Marcus Tomlinson, my former almost brother-in-law. The subject line read simply, "You should know." I hesitated before opening it. 2 years of peace. 2 years of building a life free from the toxicity of my biological family, and now this potential intrusion. But curiosity won out. I clicked. "Dr. Castellanos, I hope this email finds you well. I'm reaching out because I thought you deserved to know what's been happening with Julia and your parents. I wouldn't normally break my rule of complete separation, but given everything you did for me, I felt you should be aware. Julia has been contacting my wife, Amanda. The messages started innocuous. Congratulations on our wedding. Hopes that I was happy. Apologies for the past. Amanda, being the kind person she is, responded politely. That was a mistake. The messages became more frequent, more invasive. Julia started showing up at places she knew we'd be. My parents' church, the restaurant where Amanda works as a manager, even our neighborhood, despite living 30 miles away. She brings Sophia, the child is 2 now, and uses her as a prop, talking loudly about how Sophia's father abandoned us and how some men can't handle responsibility. When Amanda asked her to stop, Julia escalated. She filed a false police report claiming I owed her back child support. It was easily disproven with the DNA evidence and Brett's legal acknowledgement of paternity, but it caused Amanda significant stress at work. Her employer had to be briefed on the situation to understand why police were asking questions. Then last week, something happened that I think you need to know about. Julia showed up at my parents' home with Sophia, your mother, and a local news reporter. She was trying to pitch a story about deadbeat dads who escape responsibility and wanted to film in front of my parents' house. My father, bless him, called the police before they could start recording. The reporter left immediately once the situation was explained. Apparently, Julia had told him I was the father and refusing to pay support. She'd shown him doctored text messages that made it look like I was dodging responsibility. When the reporter asked for my contact information to get my side, Julia became aggressive. She started screaming that everyone was against her, that her own sister had destroyed her life out of jealousy, that she'd lost everything because of other people's cruelty. Your mother just stood there, holding Sophia, looking exhausted and defeated. Dr. Castellanos, I'm telling you this because Julia mentioned you specifically. She said, and I quote, Marina thinks she's untouchable in her perfect apartment with her perfect life, but I'm going to make sure everyone knows what she really is. She's going to pay for what she did to our family. The reporter, to his credit, did his research. He called me, called my lawyer, and verified the DNA evidence. He then wrote an article, but not the one Julia wanted. It was about parental fraud and the damage false paternity claims do to families. Julia was not portrayed sympathetically. I'm worried she might escalate her focus to you. She's clearly unraveling, and she sees you as the architect of her downfall, rather than taking responsibility for her own actions. Please be careful. Best regards, Marcus. I sat back in my chair, processing the information. Part of me had known this day would come. People like Julia don't accept consequences. They externalize blame, they rewrite history, they construct narratives where they're always the victim. I'd seen it in countless patients dealing with narcissistic family members. The pattern was textbook, but another part of me felt the old, familiar twist of anxiety. The little girl who'd spent her childhood trying to make herself smaller, less threatening, more acceptable to parents who would never accept her. That girl whispered, maybe if you'd just helped her. Maybe if you'd been kinder. Maybe if you'd given her one more chance. I recognized that voice for what it was. The trauma response of a scapegoat child, programmed to take responsibility for her abuser's behavior. I'd worked too hard in therapy to let it take root now. I forwarded Marcus's email to my lawyer, a sharp woman named Teresa Vasquez who specialized in harassment and stalking cases. Then I called the building's security office and updated them with photos of Julia, my mother, and my father, instructing them that these individuals were never to be allowed access to the building under any circumstances. Should we be concerned about a safety issue? The head of security, a retired police officer named Don Rivera, asked. Potentially, I admitted. I have a family member with a history of boundary violations and escalating behavior. I want to be proactive. Understood. We'll flag their photos in our system. Anyone tries to tailgate behind another resident, we'll stop them. Anyone asks for you at the desk, we'll call you before giving any information. That evening, I told my boyfriend James about the email. We'd been dating for 18 months. A healthy relationship built on mutual respect, clear communication, and genuine affection. He was a pediatric surgeon, someone who understood demanding careers and the importance of personal boundaries. His family had welcomed me warmly, a stark contrast to the conditional acceptance I'd grown up with. So, what are you going to do? He asked, his arm around my shoulders as we sat on my couch. The same couch Julia had once planned to claim as her own. Document everything. Increase security. Wait to see if she actually does anything or if this is just bluster. I leaned into his solid warmth. Part of me wants to reach out, to try to diffuse whatever she's planning. But I know that's the old programming talking. Engagement is what she wants. Attention, reaction, any kind of emotional response. It feeds the narrative that I'm the villain in her story. You've worked hard to build this piece, James said quietly. Don't let her steal it from you. He was right. I'd built something beautiful from the ashes of my childhood. My practice was thriving. I'd recently hired 2 associate therapists to handle the overflow of clients. My support group for family scapegoats had expanded to 3 weekly sessions with a waiting list. I'd been invited to speak at conferences about narcissistic family systems and the therapeutic approaches to healing from childhood emotional neglect. My personal life was equally rich. James and I were discussing moving in together. I had genuine friends who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. I'd traveled to places I'd always dreamed of seeing. I'd published articles, built professional respect, created a life that mattered. And I'd done it all without my family of origin. That was the part that probably enraged Julia most. I'd proven you could not just survive without them, but thrive. Her narrative required me to be miserable, alone, consumed by regret for choosing boundaries over family loyalty. My happiness was evidence that her worldview was wrong. The first direct contact came 3 days later. A letter arrived at my office, addressed in handwriting I recognized as my mother's. My receptionist, briefed on the situation, brought it to me with raised eyebrows. Should I open it? I asked Teresa on the phone. Yes, but document everything. Photograph the envelope, the postmark, the contents. If this escalates to a restraining order, we'll need evidence of the pattern. The letter was quintessential my mother. Manipulative, wrapped in martyrdom. Marina, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I'm your mother, and I need you to understand what you've done to this family. Julia is struggling. Sophia asks about her aunt sometimes, and what am I supposed to tell her? That her aunt is too selfish and cruel to care about her own family? Your father's health is failing. The stress of everything has triggered heart problems. He might need surgery, but we can't afford it because of all the legal fees from the situation you created. I've lost everything. My business, my home, my standing in the community. People cross the street to avoid talking to me. Do you know what that feels like? To be treated like a criminal because your own daughter turned the whole family against you? All because you couldn't be bothered to help your pregnant sister when she needed you most. I raised you better than this, Marina. I taught you about family loyalty, about forgiveness, about Christian charity. Where did that girl go? The sweet daughter who used to help me in the kitchen, who used to care about other people's feelings? Julia made mistakes, yes, but she's paid for them 1,000 times over. She's alone, struggling to raise a child without support, working a minimum wage job while trying to go back to school. She's trying to better herself, to build a future for Sophia, and all she gets is judgment and rejection. Your father says I should accept that you're lost to us, that the Marina we knew is gone. But I can't believe that. I can't believe my daughter has become this hard, unforgiving person who would watch her family suffer and feel nothing. I'm begging you, Marina. Not for me, not even for Julia. For Sophia, she's an innocent child who deserves to know her family. She deserves an aunt who could be a positive influence, who could show her what success looks like. You have so much, your career, your apartment, your apparently perfect life. Can't you spare some compassion for a little girl who's done nothing wrong? Please call me. Please, let's try to heal this family before it's too late. Your loving mother. I read it twice, my therapist brain automatically identifying the manipulation tactics, guilt-tripping, rewriting history, emotional blackmail, playing the victim, invoking a child's welfare, the implication that my success obligated me to share it, the suggestion that my boundaries were character flaws rather than healthy self-protection. The old Marina, the one who'd spent 29 years trying to earn scraps of parental approval, would have felt the guilt like a physical weight. She would have questioned herself, wondered if maybe she was being too harsh, considered whether she should extend an olive branch. The current Marina recognized it for what it was, a masterclass in emotional manipulation, designed to breach my boundaries and pull me back into their dysfunction. I photographed every page and added it to the growing file Teresa was maintaining. Then I shredded the original and threw it away. I didn't respond. Responding would only confirm that this method of contact worked, that persistence could break through my walls. The second letter came a week later, this time from Julia directly. It was longer, angrier, and far less calculated. Marina, Mom told me she wrote to you and you ignored her. I'm not surprised. Ignoring people who need you is kind of your specialty, isn't it? You sit in your ivory tower playing therapist, pretending to care about people's problems while your own family falls apart. Do you know what my life is like now? I work 40 hours a week at a grocery store scanning items for people who look at me with pity or disgust, because everyone in this town knows my business thanks to you. I come home exhausted to a crying toddler in my parents' crowded rental where we all share one bathroom. I can't afford my own place. I can't afford daycare. I can't afford anything because you destroyed my relationship with Marcus, cost me the child support I deserved, and turned everyone against me. Sophia deserves better than this. She deserves the life I could have given her if you hadn't interfered. She could have had a father, a real home, stability. Instead, she has a stressed, exhausted mother who can barely make ends meet. And you? You have everything. You have money, success, respect, freedom. You took the life that should have been mine and left me with scraps. I know you think you're so smart, so much better than me. You always did. Even when we were kids, you acted superior with your perfect grades and your scholarships and your I don't need anyone attitude. You were jealous that mom and dad loved me more, that I was prettier and more fun and people actually wanted to be around me. Well, congratulations, Marina. You won. You got your revenge for being the less loved daughter. You destroyed my life and our family, and you get to feel morally superior about it. But karma is real, big sister. One day, you're going to be alone in that apartment you guard like a dragon hoarding gold, and you're going to realize that all your success means nothing without family. You're going to want someone to care when you're sick or sad or scared, and there will be no one. Because you chose to be alone. You chose bitterness over forgiveness. You chose revenge over love. I hope it was worth it. This letter revealed more than Julia intended. The jealousy, the entitlement, the fundamental inability to accept responsibility. It was all there, naked and unfiltered. She genuinely believed she deserved Marcus's money and my apartment. She honestly thought she was the victim in this scenario. And the threat in that final paragraph, karma is real. That was new. That was escalation. I forwarded both letters to Teresa, who responded within an hour. This is enough for a restraining order if you want to pursue it. The implied threat in the second letter, combined with Marcus's report of harassment and the attempted media ambush, establishes a pattern of escalating behavior. I'd recommend we file. I considered it. A restraining order would formalize the boundaries I'd already established. It would create legal consequences if Julia continued to contact me. But it would also escalate the conflict, potentially triggering exactly the kind of dramatic response I was trying to avoid. Let's hold off for now, I wrote back. But prepare the paperwork. I want to be ready to file immediately if anything else happens. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Sophia, a toddler caught in the dysfunction she'd been born into, carrying DNA from a father who wanted nothing to do with her, being raised by a mother who saw her as a tool for manipulation, and grandparents who'd enabled that mother's worst behaviors for decades. The therapeutic part of me ached for that child. She was innocent in all of this. Another generation damaged by the cycle of narcissism and enabling. But I also knew that getting involved would only pull me back into the chaos. Julia would use any contact as leverage, any kindness as proof that I could be manipulated. Sophia would become another weapon in her arsenal. The cruelest part of setting boundaries with toxic family members is accepting that you can't save everyone. Sometimes protecting yourself means watching others suffer the consequences of choices you didn't make. I thought about my mother's letter, the accusation that I'd become hard and unforgiving. Maybe I had. Maybe that was exactly what I needed to become to survive. Softness and forgiveness in the face of relentless boundary violations wasn't virtue. It was self-destruction. 2 weeks passed quietly. I began to hope that the letters had been a final attempt to breach my walls, that Julia would give up and focus her energy elsewhere. I should have known better. The call came from building security at 10:47 p.m. on a Friday night. Dr. Castellanos, we have a situation. A woman claiming to be your sister is in the lobby with a child. She's saying it's a family emergency and demanding to come up. We've told her she's not on the approved list, but she's becoming increasingly agitated. She's threatened to call the police and report that we're keeping her from her sister who's in medical distress. I'm fine. No medical distress, I said, my heart rate accelerating. She's not allowed access under any circumstances. If she won't leave voluntarily, please call the police yourself and have her removed for trespassing. Understood. I'm documenting this interaction. Do you want me to stay on the line with you? Yes, please. Through the phone, I could hear raised voices in the background. Julia's voice, shrill and insistent. My sister needs me! There's been an accident! You can't keep me from her! Then another voice, calmer. Dawn Rivera. Ma'am, I have Dr. Castellanos on the phone right now. She confirms there's no emergency and that you're not authorized to enter the building. You need to leave the premises immediately. She's lying. She's just trying to keep me away from family. This is elder abuse. My mother is up there and she needs help. Your mother doesn't live in this building, and Dr. Castellanos is 32 years old. Ma'am, I'm calling the police now. You have 2 minutes to leave voluntarily before they arrive. You'll all be sorry. I'm going to sue this building, sue my sister, sue all of you. That child up there is keeping my mother prisoner. A child's crying had started in the background. Sophia, confused and frightened by her mother's escalating hysteria. My heart broke for her even as my resolve hardened. This was exactly the pattern I'd spent 2 years escaping. Police are on their way, Dawn told me through the phone. She's still in the lobby. She sat down on the floor with the child and says she's not leaving until she sees you. I'm not coming down, I said firmly. Whatever happens, I'm not engaging with her directly. Understood. I've got this handled, Dr. Castellanos. The police arrived 8 minutes later. Through the phone, I heard the officers trying to reason with Julia. Heard her shift tactics from hysteria to tearful victim. I'm just trying to see my sister. I'm a struggling single mother and my family has turned against me. All I wanted was to talk to her, and these people are treating me like a criminal. One of the officers spoke. Ma'am, your sister has confirmed there's no emergency and that you're not welcome in this building. You're currently trespassing on private property. You need to leave now or we'll have to charge you. Charge me? For trying to see my own sister? This is insane. She's turned everyone against me. She's manipulated all of you. Ma'am, final warning. Leave now or face arrest for trespassing and creating a disturbance. A long pause. Then Sophia's crying intensified, and I heard Julia's voice shift to a martyr's tone. Fine. I'll leave. I'll take my daughter and go back to our sad little life while my sister lives in luxury up there. But everyone will know the truth about what kind of person Marina Castellanos really is. Everyone will know she turned her back on her family, on her own niece, chose money and pride over love and compassion. Footsteps. A door opening. Then Dawn's voice. She's gone, Dr. Castellanos. Left in a blue Honda Civic with the child. Officers are making sure she actually leaves the property. Thank you, Dawn. No problem. I'm filing an incident report. If she comes back, we'll have documentation for a formal trespassing charge. After I hung up, I sat in my living room, my safe, hard-won living room, and I cried. Not for Julia, not for my parents, not even really for Sophia, though her innocent involvement made everything more painful. I cried for the family I'd never had, for the sister who could have been an ally instead of an enemy, for the parents who could have loved both daughters equally instead of pitting them against each other. But mostly I cried from relief. Because I'd held the boundary. I hadn't gone downstairs. I hadn't engaged. I hadn't let guilt or fear or manipulation pull me back into the dysfunction. I'd chosen myself again. And it still felt like the right choice. The next morning, Teresa called. The building sent me the security footage and incident report. We're filing for a restraining order today. This has gone far enough. I didn't argue this time. Julia had escalated to showing up at my home with a child in tow, to using that child as a prop in her manipulations, to creating a public scene that could have turned dangerous. The line had been crossed. The restraining order was granted within a week. Julia was ordered to stay at least 500 feet from my residence and workplace, to cease all contact, direct or indirect, and to remove any posts about me from social media. Violation would result in immediate arrest. My mother sent one final letter, this time through their lawyer, threatening to sue me for alienation of affection and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Teresa laughed when she read it. They have no case, she assured me. You can't alienate affection that never existed, and holding people accountable for their actions isn't emotional distress, it's consequences. She sent a response that made clear any further legal threats would result in countersuits for harassment. We never heard from their lawyer again. 3 months after the restraining order, I saw my father at the hospital. James had asked me to meet him for lunch in the cafeteria after one of his surgeries, and I rounded a corner to find my father sitting in a cardiology waiting room. He looked old, not just older, but old in a way that shocked me. Gray, diminished, wearing clothes that hung loose on a frame that had lost significant weight. Our eyes met. For a moment, I saw something in his expression, regret, maybe, or just exhaustion. Then his face hardened into the mask of controlled fury I remembered from childhood. I kept walking. I didn't stop, didn't speak, didn't acknowledge him beyond that brief moment of eye contact. He was a stranger now, someone I'd once known, someone whose DNA I shared, but no longer someone who had any claim on my time, energy, or compassion. Later, I told my therapist about the encounter. "How did it feel?" she asked. "Like seeing someone I used to work with," I said slowly. "Someone I didn't particularly like, who I have no reason to talk to anymore. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It was just nothing," she smiled. "That's healing, Marina. That's what it looks like when you've truly processed trauma and moved on. Not hatred, not anger, not even sadness. Just nothing." She was right. I'd spent 2 years building a life so full of genuine connection, meaningful work, and authentic love that the absence of my biological family had stopped being a wound and become simply a fact. They were people who'd had the chance to know me and had chosen not to. That was their loss, not mine. My practice continued to grow. My relationship with James deepened. We moved in together, started talking about marriage and the family we might build together, one based on mutual respect and unconditional love. I published my first book about recovering from narcissistic family systems. I trained other therapists in trauma-informed approaches to family estrangement, and every day I lived in the apartment they'd tried to take from me, the space they'd invaded with their measurements and their plans, and their absolute certainty that I would bend to their will. Every day was proof that they'd been wrong about me. I was never the weak daughter who couldn't say no. I was the strong daughter who'd said no when it mattered most and built a life so beautiful that their absence was barely noticeable. That was the truth Julia couldn't accept, the reality my parents couldn't face. I didn't need them. I never had. And I was better off without them. The restraining order remained in place. The letters stopped. The late-night appearances ceased. They'd finally learned what I'd been trying to teach them all along. I meant what I said, and my boundaries were non-negotiable. I was done being the family scapegoat. I was done being the backup plan. I was done being anything other than exactly who I chose to be. And who I chose to be was free.